The scream that had torn through the quiet winter night 3 hours ago still echoed in Xavier Quinlan's mind as he descended the narrow wooden stairs into his root cellar. A clay bowl of venison stew balanced carefully in one calloused hand, and a cloth-wrapped loaf of bread, still warm from the hearth, tucked under his other arm. He had been sitting by his fireplace, mending a leather harness by candlelight, when the sound had pierced the stillness raw, terrified, and distinctly female. By the time he had grabbed his lantern and coat and made it outside, the snow-covered yard had been empty except for a trail of dark droplets leading to the slanted cellar doors. Xavier had followed those drops, his heart hammering, half expecting to find a wounded animal or perhaps a thief who had injured themselves trying to break in. What he had found instead had stolen the breath from his lungs and rooted him to the spot for a full minute of stunned silence. Curled in the far corner of his root cellar, wedged between barrels of salted pork and sacks of winter potatoes, had been an orc. Not a raiding warrior or a border skirmisher, but a young woman, her green skin mottled with bruises that showed purple-black even in the dim lantern light, her clothing torn and crusted with frozen blood. Her eyes, amber gold and wide with terror, had fixed on him with the desperate wariness of a cornered fox. She had bared her small tusks in what might have been meant as a threat, but came across more as a plea not to be hurt further. Xavier had stood there, lantern raised, a dozen thoughts crashing through his mind at once. Orcs did not come to human settlements unless they were raiding. Orcs did not hide in root cellars like frightened children. Orcs were supposed to be enemies, monsters, the very creatures he had fought against during his 3 years serving in the border militia before he had taken his discharge and claimed this homestead in the frontier territories. Yet this trembling, bleeding girl looked nothing like the fearsome warriors he remembered from those brutal skirmishes. He had not spoken. She had not spoken. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few heartbeats, Xavier had slowly backed up the stairs, closed the cellar doors, and returned to his house. He had paced before his fire for the better part of an hour, arguing with himself, before finally accepting that he could not simply leave her down there to freeze or bleed to death, regardless of what she was. Now, as the first gray light of dawn began to creep through the cracks in the cellar doors, Xavier descended those stairs again, moving slowly and deliberately, making sure his boots scraped loudly on the wood to announce his presence. He kept his hands visible, the bowl and bread held out before him like an offering. The orc girl had not moved from her corner. In the better light of morning, Xavier could see her more clearly. She was young, perhaps 20 winters if orcs aged like humans did, with thick black hair that hung in matted tangles past her shoulders. Her skin was the deep green of summer leaves, and her features, while different from human, held a certain rough beauty, strong cheekbones, a broad nose, full lips that would have looked kind if they were not currently pressed into a tight line of fear and defiance. She wore the remnants of what had once been leather traveling clothes, now torn and stained. Her left arm was wrapped in a crude bandage that had soaked through with blood. "I brought food," Xavier said quietly, keeping his voice low and even, the way he would speak to a spooked horse. "You are hurt and cold. I mean you no harm." The orc girl's eyes tracked his every movement, but she did not respond. Her breathing was shallow and quick, and Xavier could see her entire body trembling, whether from cold, pain, fear, or all three, he could not tell. He set the bowl and bread down on an overturned crate about halfway between the stairs and her corner, then took several deliberate steps backward. "I will leave this here. Eat if you wish. I will not force you." Still no response. Xavier hesitated, then added, "My name is Xavier Quinlan. This is my land, my home. I do not know what brought you here or who hurt you, but you are safe in my cellar for now. I will not turn you out into the cold." He turned and climbed back up the stairs, closing the doors behind him but not latching them. His hands were shaking slightly as he returned to his house, and he had to pause on his porch to draw several deep breaths of the frigid morning air. What was he doing? Harboring an orc on his property was more than just unusual, it was potentially dangerous. If his neighbors discovered her, there would be trouble. The nearest homestead was 2 miles to the south, belonging to Thomas Marsh and his family, good people but deeply suspicious of orcs after raids had hit settlements further north last spring. Beyond that, the small frontier town of Mill Creek Ford lay another 5 miles down the road, home to perhaps 200 souls, most of them former soldiers or their families, people who had fought against orc clans and lost friends and loved ones to those conflicts. Xavier had lost people too. His younger brother had died in a border raid 7 years ago. That loss had been what drove him to enlist in the militia, driven by grief and rage and the burning need to do something. But 3 years of fighting had taught him that orcs were not mindless monsters. They had families, clans, reasons for their actions just as humans did. The conflicts along the frontier were complicated tangles of territory disputes, resource competition, and cycles of retaliation that stretched back generations. There were no simple villains in those stories, just people, human and orc alike, trying to survive in a harsh and unforgiving land. Still, knowing that intellectually, and having an injured orc woman hiding in his root cellar were very different things. Xavier spent the morning doing his usual chores, though his mind was far from focused. He fed his chickens, broke the ice on the water trough for his 2 horses and milk cow, checked his small herd of sheep in their winter pen, and split firewood until his shoulders ached. Each task was familiar, grounding, helping him think through his situation. Around midday, he returned to the cellar with a blanket and a clean cloth for bandaging. The bowl was empty, scraped clean, and the bread was gone except for a few crumbs. The orc girl watched him approach with the same wary intensity, but Xavier thought he detected slightly less raw terror in her amber eyes. "You ate. Good," he said, setting down the blanket and cloth beside the empty bowl. "Your arm needs proper tending. That bandage is soaked through. I have some salve that helps with infection and clean wrappings. Will you let me help?" The orc girl's jaw tightened. For a long moment, Xavier thought she would refuse, but then, slowly, she unwrapped her injured arm and held it out, her whole body rigid with tension. Xavier moved carefully, kneeling beside the crate and taking her arm with gentle hands. The wound was a long gash along her forearm, deep but clean-edged, as if made by a blade rather than claws or teeth. It had stopped bleeding but showed signs of inflammation around the edges. He cleaned it with water he had heated and brought down in a clay pitcher, applied his salve, a mixture of comfrey, honey, and other herbs his mother had taught him to make years ago, and wrapped it in clean linen strips. Throughout the process, the orc girl remained absolutely still, her eyes fixed on his face. Xavier could feel the coiled tension in her muscles, as if she expected him to hurt her at any moment. When he finished and carefully released her arm, she immediately pulled it back against her chest. "There," Xavier said softly. "That should heal cleaner now. You should change the dressing every day. I can bring you more cloth and salve." The orc girl studied him for another long moment, then spoke for the first time. Her voice was rough, accented, but her words were clear. "Why?" It was such a simple question, yet loaded with a lifetime of meaning. Why help her? Why risk himself? Why show kindness to an orc? Xavier sat back on his heels, considering his answer. "Because you are hurt and afraid, and I have the means to help. That seems reason enough. I am orc, she said, as if this should explain everything. I can see that. Humans kill orcs. Some do, Xavier acknowledged. And some orcs kill humans. But you are not raiding my homestead, and I am not going to hurt a wounded girl hiding in my cellar. We do not have to be enemies just because others say we should be. The orc girl's brow furrowed, suspicion and confusion warring in her expression. Clearly, she had not expected this response. You fought orcs. I smell it on you. Old blood. Old death. Xavier felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold cellar air. He had heard that orcs had keen senses, but he had not realized they could detect such things. Yes, he admitted. I served in the border militia. I fought in skirmishes. That was 3 years ago. I left that life behind when I claimed this land. Why did you leave? Because I was tired of killing, tired of watching friends die, tired of a war that seemed to have no end and no purpose except to create more grief. Xavier met her eyes steadily. I wanted to build something instead of destroying. I wanted peace. The orc girl was silent for a long time, processing this. Finally, she said, I am Nara Oakhart. It felt like a gift, that name, a tiny extension of trust. Xavier nodded respectfully. It is good to meet you, Nara Oakhart, though I wish it were under better circumstances. What happened to you? Who hurt you? Nara's expression closed off immediately, her tusks catching her lower lip as her jaw tightened. I cannot speak of it. Cannot or will not. Both. Her voice had turned hard, defensive. It is not your concern, human. Xavier raised his hands in a placating gesture. Fair enough. You do not owe me your story, but if someone is hunting you, I should know. This is isolated land, but not so isolated that trouble cannot find us. Nara looked away, her fingers clenching and unclenching on her knee. They will not come here. They think I died in the river. If I am quiet, if I am careful, they will not know. Who are they? But Nara pressed her lips together and said nothing more, her entire posture radiating a determination not to speak further on the matter. Xavier sighed but decided not to push. Trust had to be built slowly, especially with someone who had clearly been badly hurt and was terrified of whatever she had fled. Very well. You may stay here as long as you need to heal. I will bring you food and water. The cellar stays warmer than outside, and there is the blanket now. But Nara, I need you to stay hidden. If my neighbors discover you are here, there will be trouble for us both. I understand, Nara said quietly. I will be silent as stone. You will not regret this kindness, Xavier Quinlan. I swear it on my blood and bone. The solemnity of her tone, the weight she gave to those words, told Xavier that this was some kind of serious oath in orcish culture. He nodded, accepting it. Rest now. Heal. We will figure out what comes next when you are stronger. Over the following days, a strange routine established itself. Each morning before dawn, Xavier would bring Nara a warm breakfast porridge with honey, or bread with cheese, or leftover meat from his supper along with fresh water, and whatever else she might need. He would check her wound, which was healing well thanks to the salve and clean bandages, and they would exchange a few words. Nara remained guarded, but gradually, slowly, Xavier sensed her beginning to relax in his presence, the rigid terror easing into mere wariness. He learned small things about her. She was 22 winters old, slightly older than he had guessed. She came from a clan that lived in the Iron Peak Mountains, 3 weeks' travel to the north. She had 3 brothers and a sister. She was skilled with bow and spear, trained as a hunter for her clan. Her favorite food was roasted rabbit with wild herbs. She had never seen the ocean but wanted to someday. Xavier shared his own stories in return. He was 28, the eldest of 4 siblings. Though only his 2 sisters remained alive now, one married and living in a settlement to the east. the other working as a healer in a larger town 2 territories away. His parents had died of fever when he was 19, leaving him to care for his younger brother, who had been just 14. That brother, Colin, had been so eager to prove himself, had enlisted the moment he turned 17 despite Xavier's objections. 2 years later, he was dead, and Xavier had thrown himself into the militia out of guilt and grief, feeling he had failed to protect his youngest sibling. "You could not have stopped him," Nara said one morning after Xavier had shared this story. They were sitting on opposite sides of the crate now, Nara having gradually moved from her corner over the course of the week. "Young males want to prove strength. It is the same with orcs. My youngest brother, Gareth, he was always taking foolish risks, trying to show he was a great warrior. He died 2 winters ago, falling from a cliff while hunting mountain goats. He would not listen when we told him the path was too dangerous." "I am sorry," Xavier said quietly. Nara shrugged, but her eyes held old pain. "Death comes for us all eventually. We honor them by living well and remembering them with love." "A good philosophy," Xavier said. "It is the only one that does not drive you mad with grief," Nara replied. The winter days were short and cold, and Xavier's work kept him busy, but he found himself thinking about Nara often throughout his daily tasks. He wondered about her story, about what had driven her so far from her mountain home, about who had hurt her badly enough that she would rather hide in a stranger's cellar than return to her clan. He wondered if she was lonely down there in the dark, or if the solitude was a comfort after whatever trauma she had fled. He found himself bringing her small extras beyond just food and medical supplies. A book of poetry that had belonged to his mother, though he was not sure if Nara could read human script. A small carved wooden horse that he had whittled years ago. A sprig of dried lavender to make the musty cellar smell better. Nara accepted each offering with a mixture of confusion and something that might have been gratitude, though she clearly did not know what to make of his kindness. "Why do you give me these things?" she asked one morning, holding the wooden horse carefully, as if afraid she might break it. "I thought you might like them," Xavier said. "It must be dull, sitting in a cellar all day." "I have been in worse places," Nara said, but there was no heat in her words. She studied the little horse, running her thumb over its carved mane. "This is good work. You made it years ago. I used to carve to pass time during long winter nights. You should carve more. You have the hands for it." Nara paused, then added quietly, "Thank you, Xavier Quinlan, for the gifts, for the kindness, for not asking questions I cannot answer." "You are welcome, Nara Oakhart," Xavier said, and meant it with his whole heart. 2 weeks after he had first found her, Xavier woke in the middle of the night to the sound of someone screaming. He bolted from his bed, heart racing, and realized the sound was coming from the cellar. He grabbed his lantern and ran outside in his nightclothes, heedless of the snow and cold. He found Nara thrashing on the floor of the cellar, still asleep but clearly trapped in a nightmare. She was crying out in the Orcish language, words Xavier did not understand but whose terror was unmistakable. Without thinking, he knelt beside her and gently touched her shoulder. "Nara. Nara, wake up. You are safe. It is just a dream." She woke with a gasp, her eyes wild, and for a moment, Xavier thought she might strike him. But then recognition flooded her features, and she sagged forward, her face pressing against his shoulder as great shaking sobs tore from her chest. Xavier wrapped his arms around her, holding her as she cried, feeling the dampness of her tears soaking through his nightshirt. "I am sorry," she gasped between sobs. "I am sorry. I tried to be quiet. I tried not to disturb you." "Hush," Xavier said, one hand moving to stroke her hair, his fingers catching in the tangles. "It is all right. You have nothing to apologize for. Everyone has nightmares. Not like mine, Nara choked out. Not like these. Then tell me, Xavier urged gently. Let me help carry the weight. It is too heavy for one person alone. For a long moment, Nara remained pressed against him, trembling. Then, slowly, in a halting voice, she began to speak. Her clan had arranged a marriage for her, she said, to an orc named Krusk, the war leader of a neighboring clan. It was meant to be a political alliance, a way to unite the two clans against human encroachment into their territories. Nara had objected. She barely knew Krusk, and what she did know, she did not like. He was cruel and ambitious, with a reputation for brutality even by warrior standards. But her father was the clan chief, and he insisted the marriage would proceed. It was for the good of the clan, he said. Nara would learn to accept it. The wedding had been set for the winter solstice. 2 days before the ceremony, Nara had fled, unable to bear the thought of spending her life with a male she despised. Krusk had sent hunters after her, furious at the insult to his honor. They had caught her at a river crossing, and in the fight, one of them had slashed her arm. Nara had managed to kill one hunter and injure another, before throwing herself into the icy river, letting the current carry her downstream, hoping they would think she had drowned. She had washed up miles downstream, half frozen and delirious, and had wandered for days before stumbling onto Xavier's property. She had hidden in the first shelter she found, expecting to die of cold or infection or both, and then Xavier had appeared with his lantern and his unexpected mercy. "If they find me, they will take me back," Nara whispered against Xavier's shoulder. "My father will force the marriage to save face, or Krusk will kill me for the dishonor. Either way, I am dead." Xavier tightened his arms around her. "They will not take you. I will not allow it." "You cannot fight a whole clan of orc warriors, Xavier." "Maybe not, but this is my land and you are under my protection. That means something." Xavier pulled back slightly so he could look into her eyes. "You are not alone anymore, Nara. Do you understand? Whatever comes, we will face it together." Nara stared at him, her amber eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Why?" she asked again, that fundamental question. "Why would you risk everything for an orc you barely know?" Xavier had been asking himself the same question for 2 weeks, and he finally had an answer. "Because you matter. Because every time I see you, I am reminded that the divisions between our peoples are foolish and wasteful. Because you are brave and kind, and you deserve to be free to choose your own path. Because when I found you in my cellar, bleeding and terrified, something in my heart recognized something in yours, and I cannot turn away from that." "That is foolish," Nara said, but her voice was thick with emotion. "Probably," Xavier agreed, "but I have never been accused of being particularly wise." A sound that was half laugh, half sob escaped Nara's lips. She leaned her forehead against his, her breath warm on his face. "You are a strange human, Xavier Quinlan." "You are not the first to say so," Xavier murmured, acutely aware of how close they were, of the weight of her in his arms, of the way his heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. They stayed like that for a long moment, balanced on the edge of something neither of them was quite ready to name. Then Nara pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "I should let you return to your bed. You must be cold." Xavier was cold. He was in his nightclothes in an unheated cellar in the middle of winter, but he had not noticed until she mentioned it. "Will you be all right?" "I will be better now," Nara said. "Thank you for listening, for holding me. I have not had anyone to hold me since I left my clan." "Anytime you need it, I am here," Xavier said, and meant it absolutely. He climbed back up to his house, but sleep was impossible. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying the feeling of Nara in his arms, the sound of her voice as she shared her story, the look in her eyes when she asked why he would risk everything for her. The truth, Xavier realized, was that he was falling in love with her. It was absurd, impossible, dangerous, and undeniably real. Every conversation they shared, every small smile she gave him, every moment of trust she extended despite her fear, all of it was weaving a connection between them that grew stronger each day, and Xavier had no idea what to do about it. The winter solstice passed, and with it, whatever wedding would have taken place in the Iron Peak Mountains. Xavier wondered if Krusk still searched for Nara, if her clan mourned her as dead, if anyone suspected she had survived. He told no one about his hidden guest, carefully covering his tracks each time he visited the cellar, making sure no one had reason to investigate his property. Thomas Marsh stopped by one afternoon in late winter, riding up on his sturdy bay horse, his breath steaming in the cold air. Xavier met him in the yard, keeping himself positioned between Thomas and the cellar. "Xavier, good to see you," Thomas called, dismounting. "Just checking on the neighbors, making sure everyone survived the last storm all right." "I am well enough," Xavier said. "Lost a few shingles off the barn roof, but nothing I cannot repair come spring. How is your family?" "Well, thank the heavens. Though Margaret has been worrying about orc sightings. There have been tracks spotted near the northern ridge, and you know how she frets." Xavier felt his stomach clench but kept his expression neutral. "Tracks? What kind?" "Orc, definitely. Maybe 2 or 3 individuals heading east. Miller's boy saw them when he was checking his trap lines. No sign of a raiding party, but still makes folks nervous." "You have seen anything unusual on your land?" "Nothing," Xavier said, which was technically true. He had not seen any tracks. "But I will keep watch. Thank you for the warning." They talked for a few more minutes about spring planting and livestock prices, and then Thomas rode off. Xavier waited until he was out of sight before hurrying to the cellar. Nara looked up as he descended, concern creasing her brow. "There was a visitor. I heard voices." "My neighbor, Thomas. He came to warn me about orc tracks seen near the northern ridge." Xavier knelt beside her. "Nara, could those be your hunters? Could they still be searching?" Nara's face had gone pale, the green of her skin taking on an ashen undertone. "It has been weeks. I thought surely they would have given up by now. You said Krusk was proud and ambitious. Would he let an insult stand?" "No," Nara admitted, fear creeping into her voice. "No, he would not. His honor demands satisfaction. If he believes I might still live, he will search until he finds proof one way or another." Xavier stood, pacing the small space, his mind racing. "Then we need a plan. If they start searching homesteads, they will find you. We cannot hide you here forever." "I should leave," Nara said, rising unsteadily to her feet. Her arm had healed well, but weeks in the cellar had left her weak. "I will go west toward the coast, far from both human and orc territories. I will disappear where no one will think to look." "You are in no condition to travel," Xavier objected. "You have barely been outside in weeks. You would freeze or starve before you made it 10 miles. Then what do you suggest?" Nara's voice rose slightly, frustration and fear bleeding through. "I cannot stay here and put you in danger. You have given me so much already. I will not repay your kindness by bringing violence to your door." "You are not bringing anything," Xavier said firmly. "This is not your fault. But you are right that we need a better solution than hiding you in a cellar forever." He paused, an idea beginning to form. "What if we did not hide you at all?" Nara stared at him. "What do you mean?" "What if you stayed here openly as part of my household? I could say I hired you on as a laborer, someone to help with the farm work. It is not unheard of for homesteaders to take on help, especially if they are planning to expand their operations. I am an orc, Xavier. No one will believe you hired an orc. Some might question it, yes. But this is frontier territory. People here are more concerned with survival than with maintaining strict social boundaries. And if I vouch for you, if I make it clear you are under my protection, most will accept it even if they disapprove. Xavier moved closer to her. More importantly, if Krusk's hunters come looking, they will be searching for a fugitive hiding in fear, not for an orc woman living openly on a human homestead. It is the last place they would expect to find you. Nara shook her head slowly. It is too much risk. If your neighbors discover the truth, you could lose everything. And if I do nothing, I could lose you, Xavier said, the words emerging before he could stop them. They hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Nara's eyes widened. Xavier, I know it is madness, Xavier continued, his voice rough. I know we come from different worlds, that there are 100 reasons why this makes no sense, but I cannot deny what I feel, Nara. These past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your kindness despite everything you have suffered, I have come to care for you deeply. More than care for you. And I am not willing to simply let you walk away into danger if there is any alternative. For a long moment, Nara was silent, her expression caught between shock and something that looked like hope. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I feel it too, this connection between us. I tried to tell myself it was only gratitude, only the bond between someone saved and their savior, but it is more than that. When I am with you, I feel safe in a way I have not felt since I left my clan. When you look at me, I do not feel like a monster or an outsider. I feel seen. Xavier closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. Then stay. Not hiding in a cellar, but here with me. We will face whatever comes together. Your neighbors will talk, Nara warned. Let them talk. Krusk's hunters might still find me. Then we will deal with them when the time comes. I am not helpless, Nara. I know how to fight if I must. The prejudice against our peoples has to start breaking down somewhere, Xavier interrupted gently. Why not here? Why not with us? Nara looked at their joined hands, her tusks worrying her lower lip. Then she raised her eyes to his, and Xavier saw his own feelings reflected in their amber depths. All right, she said. I will stay. We will try this mad plan of yours. But Xavier, if it becomes too dangerous, if the situation threatens you or your home, we will face that if it happens, Xavier said. For now, let us take this one step at a time. First, we get you out of this cellar and into the house. You need real food, sunlight, a proper bed. Then we start letting you be seen around the property so it does not seem suspicious when neighbors eventually notice you. You make it sound simple, Nara said, but there was a hint of a smile at the corners of her mouth. It will be anything but simple, Xavier admitted. But it will be honest, and it will be together, and right now, that is enough. Moving Nara from the cellar to the house felt like a tremendous risk and a tremendous relief all at once. Xavier waited until evening when the light was dim and none of his neighbors were likely to be about, then brought her up into his home for the first time. The house was small and simple, a main room with a hearth and kitchen area, a separate bedchamber, and a small loft accessible by a ladder where Xavier stored supplies and occasionally slept during the hottest summer nights. It was built solidly, designed to withstand harsh frontier winters, with thick walls and a sturdy roof. Xavier had built most of it himself over the course of his first year on the homestead, and he felt a quiet pride seeing it through Nara's eyes. She stood in the middle of the main room, turning slowly, taking everything in. The wooden table and chairs Xavier had made, the hearth with its cooking pot and iron tools, the shelves holding his small collection of books, dishes, and supplies. The simple but comfortable furnishings that represented 3 years of work and saving. It is a good home, Nara said finally, strong, Well made. I can feel the care you put into it. It has served me well, Xavier said. And now it is yours as well for as long as you wish to stay. He heated water for washing and gave Nara privacy to clean herself properly for the first time in weeks, while he prepared a real meal, roasted chicken with root vegetables and bread, a feast by frontier standards. They ate together at the table, and Xavier was struck by how natural it felt, how right, to share his space and his meals with her. That night, Xavier insisted Nara take his bed while he made up a pallet by the fire. She had protested, but he had been firm she needed proper rest to regain her strength, and his bed, while simple, was far more comfortable than a cellar floor. In the morning, they began establishing a routine. Nara helped with chores around the homestead, starting with light tasks since her strength was still returning. She fed the chickens and collected eggs, helped Xavier repair tools in his small workshop, and began learning the rhythms of farm life. In return, she taught Xavier some Orcish words and phrases, shared stories of her clan's traditions, and showed him how to track and hunt using techniques passed down through generations of her people. It took 2 weeks before their first visitor arrived and saw Nara. It was Margaret Marsh, Thomas's wife, bringing over a basket of preserves as she did every spring. She pulled her horse up short when she saw Nara working in the garden plot, her mouth falling open in shock. Xavier, who had been mending fence nearby, quickly crossed the yard. "Margaret, good morning. I see you have met Nara." Margaret looked between Nara and Xavier, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Xavier, that is an orc." "Yes," Xavier said calmly. "Nara Oakhart. She is helping me with the homestead. I hired her on about a month ago." "You hired an orc," Margaret repeated, as if the words made no sense. "I did. She is an excellent worker, knows a great deal about tracking and hunting, and in return for her labor, I provide room and board." Xavier kept his voice matter of fact, as if this were the most natural arrangement in the world. Margaret's gaze swung to Nara, who had straightened from her work but remained silent, letting Xavier handle the explanation. "Is this true? You are working here willingly?" "I am," Nara said, her voice calm and respectful. "Xavier Quinlan has shown me great kindness. I am honored to contribute to his household." Margaret worried at her lower lip, clearly uncertain how to respond. Finally, she said, "Thomas should know about this, and probably others. If there is an orc living here, then people should know she is under my protection," Xavier said firmly. "Nara has done nothing wrong, Margaret. She is simply trying to make a living, same as any of us. I would appreciate it if you would spread that message when you tell people. She is not a threat. She is part of my household." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I will tell Thomas, and I will tell him what you said about her being under your protection. But Xavier, you must know this will cause talk." "I expect it will," Xavier said. "I am prepared for that." After Margaret left, Nara turned to Xavier with worry in her eyes. "This will make trouble for you." "Probably," Xavier agreed, "but it is the truth or close enough, and now it is out in the open, no more hiding." The talk, when it came, was intense. Over the following weeks, various neighbors found reasons to visit Xavier's homestead, clearly wanting to see the orc woman living there for themselves. Most were merely curious, some were openly disapproving, and a few were hostile. Xavier handled each visit with the same calm, matter-of-fact explanation. Nara was his hired help, she was under his protection, and she had every right to be there. To Nara's credit, she handled the scrutiny with grace and dignity. She was polite to visitors, worked hard where they could see her, and never rose to the occasional baiting comment or suspicious question. Xavier could see the toll it took on her, the way she tensed whenever someone approached, the careful mask she wore to hide her true feelings. But she never complained, never suggested they abandon their plan. Spring moved toward summer, and gradually, the novelty of an orc living on Xavier's homestead began to wear off. People grew accustomed to seeing Nara at Xavier's side when he came to town for supplies, or at the monthly community gatherings that served as the social heart of their scattered settlement. Some remained cold, but others slowly warmed, especially when Nara proved her worth by helping track a mountain lion that had been preying on livestock, and when she shared knowledge of medicinal herbs that helped cure a child's persistent fever. Through it all, Xavier and Nara grew closer. They worked side by side during the day, their partnership becoming smoother and more intuitive as they learned each other's rhythms. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking about their pasts, their hopes, their fears, the barriers between them gradually dissolving. Xavier still slept by the fire while Nara took his bed, but he was increasingly aware of how much he wanted to change that arrangement. He caught himself watching her more often, noticing the way the firelight played across her green skin, the sound of her laugh when he said something amusing, the strength in her hands as she worked. He saw the way she looked at him too, felt the crackle of tension whenever they stood close, the lingering touches that lasted a moment longer than strictly necessary. They were falling in love. Both of them knew it, but neither quite knew how to bridge that final gap between acknowledgement and action. The situation came to a head on a warm summer evening, nearly 5 months after Xavier had first found Nara in his cellar. They had spent the day working on expanding the garden, hard physical labor under the sun, and both were tired and dusty as they cleaned up for supper. Nara was washing at the basin, her back to Xavier, and he was struck by how much she had changed since that terrified girl curled in his cellar. She stood taller now, moved with confidence, her laughter came easier. She had gained back the weight she had lost, her muscles filling out from good food and hard work. She looked healthy, strong, beautiful. "I can feel you staring," Nara said without turning around, amusement in her voice. Xavier felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Sorry, I was just thinking about how much things have changed since winter." "For the better, I hope," Nara said, drying her face and turning to face him. "Definitely for the better," Xavier said. Then, because he was tired of dancing around his feelings, he added, "Nara, we should talk about this, about us." Nara's expression became serious. "I know. We have been avoiding it for weeks now." "I love you," Xavier said simply, deciding there was no point in being anything but direct. "I think I have loved you since that night you told me your story and I held you while you cried. Maybe even before that. I know this situation is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why this could be a disaster, but I cannot keep pretending what I feel is anything less than love." Nara crossed the space between them in 3 quick steps, her hands coming up to frame his face. "I love you too, you foolish, wonderful human. I have been terrified to say it, terrified that if I admitted it out loud, something would happen to take you away from me, but I am done being afraid. I love you, Xavier Quinlan, and I want to be with you, truly with you, not just as a guest in your house or a worker on your land." Xavier pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Then stay with me, not as hired help or as someone under my protection, but as my partner. As the woman I love who I hope loves me in return." "I do," Nara breathed. "I love you so much." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, learning each other. Then it deepened, months of denied longing finally given permission to surface. Nara's tusks pressed against Xavier's face, different but not unpleasant, just another aspect of her that he loved. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I was afraid you would not want me," Nara admitted, "that the differences between us would be too great." The only difference that matters is that you are you and I am me, Xavier said. Everything else we can figure out together. That night, Xavier did not sleep by the fire. They lay together in his bed, wrapped in each other's arms, talking quietly until sleep claimed them. It felt like coming home, like finding a piece of himself he had not known was missing. They spent the next weeks in a haze of happiness, finally free to show their affection openly, at least within the privacy of their home. In public, they remained careful. Xavier knew that while people had accepted Nara as his hired help, they would be far less accepting of a romantic relationship between human and orc. It was too much, too fast, too contrary to generations of prejudice and conflict. But within their own walls, they held nothing back. They learned each other in every way, finding joy and comfort in each other's presence. Xavier had never been happier, and he could see the same contentment in Nara's eyes. Summer moved toward autumn, and Xavier began to hope that perhaps they had escaped the worst of the danger. The hunters had not appeared. Krusk had not come seeking vengeance. Perhaps Nara's clan truly believed her dead, and she was free to build a new life here with him. It was a foolish hope. Xavier was working in his workshop one afternoon in late summer, repairing a broken wheel when Nara burst through the door, her face pale with fear. "They are here," she gasped. "3 orc warriors coming up the road from the south. I saw them from the ridge. Xavier, they are Krusk's hunters." "I recognize their colors." Xavier's blood ran cold, but he forced himself to remain calm. "How long do we have?" 10 minutes, maybe less. All right. Xavier's mind raced, running through options. "Go into the house. Act natural. You are my hired help, remember. They have no reason to suspect you are who they seek. Xavier, if they recognize me, we will deal with that if it happens. But right now, we need to present a united, confident front. Trust me, Nara." Nara nodded, though fear still haunted her eyes. They walked together to the house, and Xavier positioned himself in the yard where he would meet the approaching orcs, while Nara waited on the porch, visible but slightly behind him. The 3 orcs appeared minutes later, cresting the small rise that led to Xavier's homestead. They were warriors. That much was immediately clear: tall, muscular, armed with spears and axes, moving with the confident stride of those who expected conflict and welcomed it. The leader was a massive orc with a scar running down the left side of his face, his tusks decorated with silver rings. They stopped a dozen yards from Xavier, spreading out slightly in a formation that suggested military training. "Human," the scarred orc said, his voice deep and rough. "We seek a fugitive, an orc female who fled her betrothed and brings dishonor to her clan. We have tracked her to this region." "Have you seen such a one?" Xavier kept his posture relaxed, confident, meeting the orc's gaze steadily. "I have seen no fugitives, only my land, my livestock, and my household. Who are you to come onto my property making demands?" The scarred orc's eyes narrowed. "I am Rusk, war pack leader under Krusk Ironhand. The fugitive is his promised bride. Her name is Nara Oakhart, and Krusk will have his honor satisfied. Step aside, human, so we may search your buildings." "You will not," Xavier said flatly. "This is my land and you have no authority here. If you wish to search, you will need to petition the territorial magistrate and obtain proper documentation, same as anyone else." Rusk's lips pulled back in something between a snarl and a smile. "You would hide behind human laws to protect an orc fugitive. Interesting." "I am not hiding behind anything. I am simply standing on my rights as a landowner. You have made an accusation, but you have provided no evidence, and I have no reason to cooperate with armed strangers who show up making threats." One of the other hunters had been scanning the homestead, and his gaze locked on Nara standing on the porch. He said something in the orcish language, and Rusk's attention snapped to her. There was a long, terrible moment of silence as Rusk studied Nara, and Xavier saw recognition flare in the warrior's eyes. "That is her," Rusk said, his voice hardening. "That is Nara Oakhart. Stand aside, human. She belongs to Krusk Ironhand, and she will return with us to face judgment." "She belongs to no one but herself," Xavier said, his hand moving to the hatchet at his belt, not a real weapon, but better than nothing. "And she is under my protection. You are not taking her anywhere." Nara stepped forward, moving to stand beside Xavier. Her voice was steady, though Xavier could hear the fear underlying it. "I will not return, Rusk. I will not marry Krusk. I have made my choice." "You bring shame to your clan," Rusk spat. "You bring shame to your father. Krusk has offered you great honor, and you spit on it to live as a servant to a human." "I am not a servant," Nara said, her voice growing stronger. "I am free. I choose my own path now. Tell Krusk that Nara Oakhart is dead as he believed. The woman standing before you is someone new, and she owes him nothing." Rusk took a step forward, and Xavier moved to intercept him. "You are not welcome here. Leave my land now, or I will defend it and everyone on it. You think you can stand against 3 orc warriors, human?" Rusk laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You are brave, I will grant you that. Foolish, but brave." "Maybe," Xavier said, "but I am also not alone. You 3 are standing in the middle of human territory, making threats against someone under the protection of a human landowner. If you start a fight here, it will not end well for you, even if you win. The territorial militia will hunt you down, and your presence here will start a war between your clans and the human settlements. Is Krusk's honor worth that?" Xavier was bluffing. He had no idea if the militia would actually respond, or how long it would take them to arrive even if they did. But his words gave Rusk pause, and Xavier pressed his advantage. "Nara is making a new life here, far from your clans, far from your conflicts. She seeks no revenge, makes no claims. She simply wishes to be left in peace. Cannot you allow her that? Cannot Krusk's pride be satisfied knowing she is gone from his life, causing him no further trouble?" Rusk's jaw worked, his fists clenching and unclenching. Finally, he said, "Krusk will not accept this. His honor demands satisfaction." "Then let him come himself and face me," Xavier said. "Let him stand where you stand now and make his case, but I will not hand over someone I love to be punished for wanting to be free." The word love hung in the air like a thrown weapon, and Xavier saw shock register on the faces of all 3 hunters. "You claim to love this orc," Rusk said slowly, disbelief coloring his tone. "I do," Xavier said firmly, reaching out to take Nara's hand in his. "I love her and she loves me. We are building a life together here. That is why she will not return with you, and that is why I will fight you to my last breath if you try to take her." Rusk stared at them for a long moment, something complex moving through his expression. Then he shook his head. "This is madness, unnatural. An orc and a human is no one else's concern but ours," Xavier interrupted. "We harm no one. We break no laws. We simply choose to love each other despite the prejudices of our peoples. If that is madness, then I welcome it." Rusk looked to his fellow hunters, some silent communication passing between them. Then he turned back to Xavier and Nara. "I will report what I have found to Krusk. What he chooses to do with this information is his decision. But hear me, human, if he comes, he will not come alone, and he will not be satisfied with words. If he comes, we will face him," Xavier said. "Together." Rusk studied them one more time, then spat on the ground and turned away, his hunters following. They disappeared over the rise, heading back the way they had come, and Xavier finally allowed himself to breathe. Nara's hand was trembling in his, and when he looked at her, he saw tears streaming down her face. "You stood against them for me. You told them you loved me. I do love you, Xavier said, pulling her into his arms. And I meant every word. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Krusk will come, Nara whispered against his chest. You know he will. His pride will demand it. Then we prepare, Xavier said. We warn the neighbors, we contact the militia, we do everything we can to be ready. But Nara, I will not lose you. Not to him. Not to anyone. They spent the rest of the day and evening preparing. Xavier sent word to Thomas Marsh about the confrontation, and Thomas, to his credit, immediately rallied several other homesteaders to Xavier's cause. By nightfall, 6 men with hunting rifles and frontier fighting experience had gathered at Xavier's homestead, prepared to help defend it if the orc warriors returned. You have done a mad thing, Xavier, Thomas said as they checked weapons and discussed strategy. But you are our neighbor, and out here, that means something. If these orcs want trouble, they will find it. Xavier was grateful for the support, even as he worried about drawing his neighbors into danger. But as Thomas said, frontier folk looked after their own, and Xavier had proven himself a good neighbor over the past 3 years. Nara spent the evening with the gathered men, sharing what she knew about orc warrior tactics and suggesting defensive positions around the homestead. Xavier could see some of the men were uncomfortable taking strategic advice from an orc, but they could not deny that her knowledge was valuable, and gradually, they began listening to her with grudging respect. It was Margaret Marsh who surprised Xavier the most. She had come with Thomas and spent time talking with Nara while the men prepared. Later, she pulled Xavier aside. I did not understand at first why you would take such a risk, she said quietly. But seeing you two together, seeing the way you look at each other, I understand now. That is real love, Xavier, the kind worth fighting for. You have my support for whatever that is worth. It is worth a great deal, Xavier said, his throat tight with emotion. Thank you, Margaret. They waited 2 days before Krusk came. He arrived at dawn with a war party of 12, all heavily armed, all radiating menace. Xavier and his allies were ready, positioned around the homestead with weapons trained on the approaching orcs. Krusk Ironhand was everything Xavier had imagined and worse, a massive orc warrior, his body covered in scars, his eyes cold and cruel. He carried a great axe that looked like it could split a man in half, and he moved with the absolute confidence of someone who had killed many times and expected to kill again. Xavier Quinlan, Krusk called, his voice booming across the yard. I have come for what is mine. Send out Nara Oakhart, and we will leave peacefully. Refuse, and we will take her by force. Xavier stepped out onto his porch, Nara at his side, both of them dressed and armed. Behind them, through the windows, the barrels of rifles could be seen, making clear that the homestead was defended. Nara Oakhart is not yours and never was, Xavier called back. She is her own person, free to make her own choices. She has chosen to stay here with me. You have no claim on her. I have the claim of honor, Krusk snarled. She was promised to me. She fled like a coward. Her father gave his word, and his daughter has made him a liar and me a fool. That requires satisfaction. I am sorry my choice hurt your pride, Nara said, her voice carrying clearly. But I will not sacrifice my entire life to soothe it. I did not want to marry you, Krusk. I told my father that, and he would not listen, so I made my own choice. That does not make me a coward, it makes me free. You are nothing, Krusk spat. A disgrace to your clan. I should have let you drown in that river. Perhaps you should have, Nara agreed. Then you could have mourned appropriately and moved on with your life. But I lived, and I built a new life here, and I will not give that up. Krusk's grip on his axe tightened. Then I will take it from you. I will kill your human lover and drag you back to the mountains in chains. Your father will beat the defiance out of you, and you will learn your proper place. You will do no such thing, Thomas Marsh called from his position near the barn. There are 8 rifles pointed at you and your warriors right now, Krusk Ironhand. You take one step forward in aggression and we will cut you down. Krusk's eyes swept the homestead, clearly assessing the situation. You would start a war for this, humans. For one defiant orc female, we would defend our neighbor, Thomas replied. Xavier Quinlan is one of us. Nara Oakhart lives under his protection on his land. That makes her one of us too. You want her, you go through all of us. Xavier could see Krusk calculating, weighing his options. The orc war leader was arrogant and proud, but he was not stupid. A fight here would be costly, possibly fatal, and even if they won, the repercussions would follow them back to their clans. Xavier decided to offer one more option. Krusk, I know you feel wronged. I understand your pride is hurt, but there is no future in continuing this. Nara has made her choice. Force her back and she will flee again at the first opportunity, or worse, she will make your life miserable until one of you kills the other. Is that what you want? A wife who despises you? I want satisfaction, Krusk growled. Then take it in a different form, Xavier said. Not with violence, but with honor. Accept that Nara has chosen a different path. Tell your clan that she died in the river, which is what you believed anyway. Let her go, and in return, I give you my word that she will make no claims against you or her former clan, will not speak against you, will not interfere in your affairs. She will be as dead to you as you believed she was. Is that not better than starting a war? Krusk was silent for a long time, his jaw working. Finally, he looked past Xavier to Nara. You truly choose this? This human, this life? I do, Nara said firmly. I love him, Krusk. I am sorry that hurts you, but it is the truth. I love him and I want to build a life with him. Please let me go. Let us both move on. Something shifted in Krusk's expression, some of the rage draining away to be replaced by weariness. You were always stubborn, he said, almost conversationally. Even when we were children and our clans would meet, you would argue with the elders and insist on your own way. I thought I could master that stubbornness, bend it to my will. But I see now that you are unbendable, Nara Oakhart, or perhaps you simply refuse to bend for me. I refuse to bend for anyone who tries to control me, Nara said. But I will walk beside someone who respects me as an equal. That is the difference. Krusk looked at Xavier. You have courage, human, standing against me for her, and you have honor, offering me a path that avoids bloodshed. I do not understand your love for an orc, but I see it is real. He paused, then said, Very well. I accept your terms. Nara Oakhart is dead, drowned in the river as I believed. The woman standing before me is a stranger, no concern of mine. But hear this, if you ever return to orc lands, if you ever make claims against me or your former clan, this truce ends. Do you understand? I understand, Nara said. I will not return. My life is here now. Krusk nodded slowly, then turned to his warriors. We leave. There is nothing for us here. He started to walk away, then paused and looked back. Be happy with your strange choice, Nara, who was, and human, treat her well. She is fiercer than you know. I know, Xavier said, and I will. They watched as Krusk and his war party departed, disappearing over the ridge heading north. Only when they were completely out of sight did Xavier allow himself to sag with relief, his legs suddenly weak. The gathered homesteaders erupted in cheers, congratulating each other on facing down the orc warriors without bloodshed. Thomas clapped Xavier on the back so hard he nearly knocked him over. That was well done, Xavier. Tense as hell, but well done. Thank you, Xavier managed. Thank you all. I could not have done this without you. That is what neighbors are for, Thomas said. Though I will admit, I did not expect to be facing down a dozen orc warriors when I woke up this morning. You live an interesting life, friend." After the others left, Xavier and Nara stood together in the yard, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. It was over, truly over. Nara was free not just physically, but legally, socially, completely. "We did it," Nara said wonderingly. "I am free, I can stay." "You can stay," Xavier agreed, pulling her close. "Forever if you want." "I want," Nara said, tilting her face up to his. "I want forever with you, Xavier Quinlan." They kissed there in the morning sunlight, no longer hiding, no longer afraid, just two people in love beginning their future together. The months that followed were not without challenges. Some neighbors remained suspicious of Nara, and there were a few who refused to associate with Xavier because of his choice to be with an orc. But far more people accepted them, gradually coming to see Nara not as an orc, but simply as Nara, Xavier's partner, a valuable member of their community, someone who contributed and helped and belonged. Nara proved herself again and again. When a harsh autumn storm damaged several homesteads, she worked tirelessly alongside the humans to make repairs. When human raiders, this time attempted to hit a supply convoy heading to Mill Creek Ford, Nara's tracking skills helped the militia intercept them before they could strike. When fever swept through the settlement during winter, Nara's knowledge of orcish medicine complemented the human healer's techniques, and together they saved lives that might otherwise have been lost. Slowly, gradually, Nara stopped being Xavier's orc woman and simply became Nara, a resident of their frontier community, someone with a name and a reputation of her own. Spring came again, a full year since Xavier had first found Nara in his root cellar, and the world seemed full of possibility. They had expanded the homestead, significantly more land cleared for planting, a larger barn built, their herds grown. It was becoming a proper farm, and Xavier could envision a real future here. One evening in early spring, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Xavier reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. He had carved it himself over the long winter, working in secret whenever Nara was occupied elsewhere. "Nara," he said, his heart hammering, "this past year with you has been the best of my life. Every morning I wake up grateful that you are here, that you chose me, that we have built this life together. I know our peoples do not have traditions for this kind of union, but I do not care about tradition. I care about you. I care about us." He opened the box, revealing a ring he had crafted from silver, inlaid with a small piece of jade he had traded for specifically because its green reminded him of her skin. "Will you marry me, Nara Oakhart? Will you be my wife, officially and formally, bound together in the eyes of whatever gods watch over us both?" Nara's eyes had gone wide, her hand pressing to her mouth. "Xavier, humans and orcs do not marry." "Perhaps they do not usually," Xavier said, "but we are not usual. We have already broken every rule, challenged every expectation. Why stop now? I love you, Nara. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to formalize that, make it official, show the whole world that we are choosing each other forever." Tears were streaming down Nara's face now, but she was smiling, her tusks catching the last light of the sunset. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, you foolish, wonderful human. I will marry you, I will be your wife, and you will be my husband, and we will make our own traditions." Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and hope he felt. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. "How will we even do this?" Nara asked, staring at the ring on her finger. "What kind of ceremony?" "No human priest will marry us, and we cannot travel to orc lands for their rituals." Then we make our own ceremony, Xavier said. We invite our friends and neighbors and we stand before them and make vows to each other. We do not need priests or officials. We just need our words and our commitment. I like that, Nara said softly. Making our own way. It fits us. They held their wedding ceremony on a perfect summer day 2 months later. They had cleared a space in the meadow behind Xavier's homestead, their homestead now, and set up simple benches for guests. More people came than Xavier had expected, nearly 40 from the surrounding homesteads and town, people who had come to respect and care for Nara over the past year. Thomas Marsh stood as Xavier's witness, and Margaret Marsh stood as Nara's, both of them beaming with pride at being included in such a historic moment. Xavier wore his best clothes, simple but clean, and Nara wore a dress that Margaret and several other women had helped her make deep green to match her skin, with intricate embroidery along the hems in both human and orcish patterns. They stood facing each other in the center of the gathering, hands joined, and spoke the vows they had written together, a mixture of human marriage traditions and orcish bonding customs, something entirely their own. I, Xavier Quinlan, take you, Nara Oakhart, to be my wife, Xavier said, his voice carrying clearly. I vow to stand beside you through all seasons, to share your burdens and your joys, to honor your strength and support your dreams. I vow to love you without reservation, to build our future together, and to never let fear or prejudice divide us. My heart is yours, now and always. Nara's voice was thick with emotion as she spoke her own vows. I, Nara Oakhart, take you, Xavier Quinlan, to be my husband. I vow to walk beside you through all challenges, to share your path and your purpose, to cherish your kindness and match your courage. I vow to love you without limit, to make our home a place of peace, and to never forget the mercy you showed a frightened girl in a root cellar. My heart is yours, now and forever. They exchanged rings. Xavier wore a matching silver band that Nara had commissioned from the town blacksmith, and then, to the cheers of their gathered friends, they kissed as husband and wife. The celebration that followed was joyous and heartfelt. Someone had brought instruments, and there was music and dancing. Food was shared, human dishes and orcish recipes that Nara had taught some of the women to make. Stories were told, toasts were offered, and as the sun set and lanterns were lit, Xavier looked around at the gathering and felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had built not just a relationship but a community that accepted that relationship. They had proven that love could bridge the divides between peoples, that courage and kindness could overcome prejudice and fear. That night, after the last guests had departed and they were alone in their home, Xavier and Nara lay together in their bed, wrapped in each other's arms. "Are you happy?" Xavier asked, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Nara said. "When I fled my clan, I thought my life was over. I expected to die alone in the wilderness. Instead, I found you, and through you, I found a home and a family and a future I never dreamed was possible." "We found each other," Xavier corrected gently, "and we built this together." "Together," Nara agreed, her fingers lacing with his. "Always together." The years that followed were good ones. Xavier and Nara's homestead prospered, becoming one of the most successful farms in the region. They expanded their land, hired additional help, and became a central part of their community's economy and social fabric. More importantly, they became a bridge. Other orcs, hearing somehow of a clan less orc living peacefully among humans, began to cautiously make contact. Trade relationships developed, and while tensions still existed between orc clans and human settlements, The example of Xavier and Nara showed that cooperation was possible. 5 years after their wedding, Nara gave birth to their first child, a son they named Colin, after Xavier's lost brother. The boy had his mother's green skin and his father's brown eyes, his mother's small tusks and his father's smile. He was beautiful and perfect, and both human and orc neighbors came to meet him and offer blessings. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, named Alara for Xavier's mother. She had her father's skin, but her mother's amber eyes and pointed ears, another perfect blend of their joined heritages. The children grew up knowing they were loved, knowing they belonged to two worlds and had to forge their own path between them, but never doubting that they were wanted and cherished. Xavier and Nara raised them with stories of both human and orc traditions, teaching them to value both sides of their heritage. Other mixed couples began to appear in the region, emboldened by Xavier and Nara's example. It was never easy, never simple, but slowly, gradually, the walls between the peoples began to lower, at least in this corner of the frontier. Xavier often thought back to that winter night when he had descended into his root cellar with a warm loaf of bread, uncertain and afraid but unable to turn away from someone in need. That simple act of mercy, that moment of compassion, had changed both their lives in ways he could never have imagined. He had found an orc girl curled in his root cellar, terrified and wounded, and he had quietly brought her a warm loaf. From that small kindness had grown love, family, community, and hope for a better future. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Xavier and Nara would sit on their porch and watch their children play in the yard, the sun setting behind the mountains that had once been Nara's home and were now just part of the landscape they shared. Nara would lean against Xavier's shoulder, and he would wrap his arm around her, and they would simply exist in that moment of peace and contentment. "Do you ever regret it?" Xavier asked once, many years into their marriage. "Leaving your clan, choosing this life?" Nara had looked at him with such love in her amber eyes. "Never, not for a single moment. I have everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed of. I have you. I have our children. I have a home and a community and a life I chose for myself. How could I regret that?" "I am glad," Xavier had said, kissing her temple, "because you gave me everything I did not know I was looking for. You made me whole." "We made each other whole," Nara had corrected, as she always did. "That is what love does. It does not complete us, we were always complete. But it makes us better, stronger, more than we could be alone." Xavier grew old beside Nara, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of years of hard work and good living. Their children grew and had children of their own, a new generation that saw human-orc relationships as unusual perhaps, but not impossible, not forbidden. The frontier settlement where they lived grew into a proper town, and that town became known for its unusual tolerance, its willingness to trade and negotiate with orc clans, its reputation as a place where different peoples could meet in relative safety. Much of that reputation rested on the foundation Xavier and Nara had built simply by loving each other and refusing to let prejudice dictate their lives. On his 70th birthday, Xavier sat on his porch with Nara beside him, surrounded by children, grandchildren, friends both human and orc, all gathered to celebrate. He looked around at the faces green and tan, tusked and smooth, young and old, all smiling, all there because of the life he and Nara had built together. "We did well," he said quietly to Nara, taking her weathered hand in his. "We did very well," Nara agreed, her voice still strong despite her years. "We found love where no one expected it, built a family that defied all conventions and proved that hearts have no boundaries. I would call that a life well lived. "I love you," Xavier said, the same words he had spoken thousands of times over their decades together, and which never grew stale or empty. "I love you," Nara replied, her tusked smile as beautiful to him as the day they wed. "Always and forever, my heart." They sat together as the celebration continued around them. Two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and had built something beautiful from that chance encounter in a root cellar so many years ago. Their story was not one of grand adventures or epic battles, but of quiet courage, steady love, and the profound power of showing mercy to a stranger in need. It was a story that would be told for generations in that frontier town, the tale of the human man who found an orc girl curled in his root cellar and quietly brought her a warm loaf, and how from that simple act of kindness grew a love that changed their world. And they lived happily, surrounded by the family and community they had built. Their hearts joined from that winter night until their last days, proving that love, when given freely and without reservation, could overcome any obstacle and bridge any divide. The end came peacefully for them both, years later, Xavier passing in his sleep at 83 with Nara's hand in his, and Nara following just a few months later, her heart finally giving out in the garden she had tended for so many years. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their homestead, beneath a tree they had planted together on their first anniversary, and their graves became a place of pilgrimage for those who believed in love that transcended boundaries. Their children carried on their legacy, as did their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, each generation furthering the work of bringing their peoples together. The prejudices did not vanish overnight, but they lessened, year by year, as more people saw that orcs and humans could live together, work together, love together. And it had all started with a frightened orc girl hiding in a root cellar, and a human man who chose compassion over fear, kindness over convention, love over prejudice. Their story became legend, but it had begun in the simplest possible way, with a warm loaf of bread offered in the darkness, and a heart open enough to see the person behind the stranger. That was their legacy, that simple truth that every person deserves mercy, every heart deserves love, and every choice to extend kindness, no matter how small it seems, has the power to change the world.